Welcome to part 1 of the CostX training video series. In part 1, we will demonstrate how CostX can measure from 2D drawings and show some handy tools that will help you create a faster, smarter and more accurate estimate. Firstly, let's take a look at the CostX sidebar, which is located to the left-hand side of the screen, where we'll see two main tabs at the top relating to the two views within CostX. Currently, we are in the Dimension view, which is where the on-screen measurement takes place. There is also the Costing view, which we will touch on in part 2 of the CostX training video series. In the Dimension view, there are two sections to the sidebar: a Drawing section, which we shall look at first, and a Dimension Groups section, which we shall look at later. Within the Drawing section, we have a list of drawings which have already been loaded into the CostX building. We have the ability to arrange these drawings into folders and subfolders, so if required, we could categorize them into architectural, structural, MEP drawings, etc. Adding drawings in CostX is simply a matter of opening the Drawings ribbon and clicking on the Add button. CostX supports a huge range of drawing files, including CAD, PDF, and image files, as well as BIM. Throughout this video, we will be working with three main 2D drawing files. Firstly, a DWG file, which is capable of being rich in intelligent content, allowing CostX users to leverage this intelligence to extrapolate easy and fast measurements. Next, we have a vector-based PDF file here, which still contains some intelligence, but to a lesser level. Finally, the third file we will be working with is a simple image file, also referred to as a raster file. It could be a JPEG, TIFF, or other common image file, or you can get raster PDFs too. This does not contain any level of intelligence, but of course you can still measure from it quickly and easily within CostX. Note that as each drawing is opened, in the full version of CostX it appears on the tab below the ribbon. Double-clicking on the tabs opens each drawing in a separate window, which can be resized and positioned anywhere on screen. With all drawing types, we have the ability to zoom in and out by rolling the mouse wheel forward and backward, or pan by simultaneously clicking down the mouse wheel and moving the mouse. BIM files are covered in part 3 of the CostX training video series. For more information on drawing files and suggestions to optimize their layout and content, please look at our drawing file optimization document. Before starting a new takeoff, we have the option to display the scale and calibration factors of each drawing if required, helping identify those that may not yet be set correctly. Let's take a look at our vector PDF file. If you're finding it difficult to see specific lines in the drawing, it may be helpful to change the background from black to white. We can check that the drawing is set to the correct scale by clicking on the Measure Distance button. We can set in either metric or imperial depending on the drawing. Note that with the Geometry Snap button on, the cursor attaches to the drawn lines, increasing accuracy. Here we can see the scale is not correct. However, after a quick calculation, I've derived that this drawing is in fact a 1:200 drawing. Therefore, we can set the scale in the Drawing Properties window. Depending on the choice of drawing, unit of measurement, the corresponding common scales can be selected from this drop-down, or entered in manually. If we don't know the scale at all, we can calibrate the drawing instead. We can choose to either calibrate the x-axis or the y-axis, or both independently if preferred. Here we have a stated dimension on the x-axis. Just click across the known dimension and type in the actual measurement, in this case 4,500 millimeters. By unchecking the option to apply to the opposite axes, CostX will allow independent calibration of both axes. If we aren't entirely happy with the calibration, we can clear it with the Reset button and then restart the calibration or scaling process. Working with layers is another great feature that is available in CostX. Layers are another level of intelligence added into the drawing by the designer. Most DWG files and some vector-based PDFs will have layers. Vector PDFs with no inbuilt layers now automatically get layers generated from the various types and colors of geometry. Image files, also known as raster files, will not contain any layers, however. To see a list of layers, go to the CostX sidebar and click on the Layers tab. We can see there are a lot of names here that may not properly describe the layer's content. However, we don't need to know the layer naming convention because in CostX we can simply turn off the layers visually. Notice as we move the cursor around the drawing, the cursor is connecting to the various lines and highlighting them in orange. We can also hold down the Shift key, which will highlight all lines in the same layer in order to give us a preview of what we're about to turn off. So, if we wanted to turn off the sanitary items, for example, just hover over one, click, and then they're out of the way. Through this, we can clean up the drawing and make it easier to measure from. To turn all the layers back on, you can just click the Show All button. We can also invert the layers if required. Say we wanted to only see the sanitary features. Instead of turning off every single other layer, we can just again click on the sanitary items layer to turn it off, and then go up and click on the Invert button. Now, the sanitary items are the only layer we can see. In the Dimension Group section, we have a list of dimension groups categorized into folders. Currently, these are in elemental format, but we can categorize however we require. When we start a new building, we can add dimension groups as we go from scratch. This is quite simple to do. Simply select the Dimensions ribbon and click the Add button. A dialog window comes up where we can enter a variety of important details. Firstly, the name of the new dimension group, and then the folder name with a subfolder if required that you want to be sorted into. The measurement type is the type of item you wish to measure, for example, area, length, etc. Then, the default display is the figure that you wish to display in the dimension group list. The multiplier is used for a dimension group that would need to be multiplied by a number. For example, if measuring an apartment that has the same layout for 12 stories of the building, we could apply a default multiplier of 12. The default height represents the height you wish to be applied to the dimension group, and the default offset can be used for items such as windows, where the offset field is the length between the ground and the base of that item. There are also some color and hatching options. We can change the color of our positive dimensions by clicking on the down arrow and choosing a different color. If the color of choice is not available from the drop-down list, then we could simply scroll down and click on the Custom option, which will bring up a window displaying a color palette for more specific options. This also applies to the negative dimensions. Finally, we have the Extended Properties section. If we were measuring something like steel, here we have the ability to apply a unit of measurement for the steel weights. We'll explore the custom fields later in this video. When ready to add, just press Insert. However, we don't need to create a new list every time we start a new building. We can set up standard dimension groups will then always appear when adding a new building. Or we can add a new building based on a previous building and use the existing dimension groups list from a pre-existing building, like this particular list here. We can have multiple lists set up for different types of buildings. Finally, the last part of the task pane is the Dimensions section, which shows the separate measured dimensions that make up a quantity in the selected dimension group. When we're ready to start our takeoff, make sure we've selected the Drawings tab. When we hover over the drawing, we can see the lines now highlighting green when the cursor connects to them instead of orange. Now before we start measuring, we need to select the relevant dimension group. Right now, we want to measure an area from the bedrooms, so we'll have the bedrooms dimension group selected. So as mentioned before, DWG files can be very rich in intelligent content. With a DWG, designers may include continuous lines, known as polylines, around enclosed areas on the drawing. This means we can use that polyline information to highlight that area by holding down the L key, and with the click of a button, measure the enclosed area. We'll notice that as we've clicked, our bedrooms dimension group has been populated with a quantity of 26 square meters. So it's really very easy to get accurate quantities in no time at all. If we now move over to our PDF, we can also use the vector lines in this drawing to measure areas with what's called the quick point function. We can also use the standard technique to click around the required area. We can see here the cursor is connecting to lines on the drawing, and we refer to it as the sticky cursor. So we can just click around these lines and press the enter to complete the room dimension and populate that dimension group with another area measurement. CostX also makes it easy to measure around a curved area. Just hold down the mouse button and drag around the curve, and then we've picked up that area quite easily. We can see that as these areas are being picked up, there's a running total over in the dimension group of 78 square meters. Now let's move on to the image file. So as mentioned, this isn't an intelligent file source. Previously, we've been measuring in line mode, which creates the sticky cursor effect. However, in the image file, we'll measure in point mode, as there are no vector lines. So with point mode, we can just trace over the top of the drawing. So measuring an area, we just go over the lines like so. Then once completed, pressing enter finishes the area, and once again we see that being added to our dimension group. If required, we can turn our angle snap button on. This means that when we extend the lines out to the next point, they snap in incremental angles of 15 degrees, just like this. We can also turn this function on whilst in line mode instead of point mode for our DWG and PDF files if required. Moving on, this DWG drawing is of an apartment block. The area for some of the apartments have already been measured. We can see some similar shaped areas that have not yet been accounted for. Therefore, we can save some time by copying and pasting these measured dimensions to the other side of the building. In order to do that, we need to firstly select the measured dimensions we want to copy. We have a few different options to do this. One option is to hold down the Control key on the keyboard and simply click each measured dimension. Alternatively, we can right-click on a dimension, hover over Select Dimensions, and click on the Select All Dimensions. This also has a shortcut key. Simply point at the dimensions and hold down the Control-A keys on the keyboard. Finally, we have the option of clicking the Select in Area button and simply drag a rectangular box around the dimensions we want selected. Now that we have these dimensions selected, we can copy and paste these dimensions by using the right-click options or just simply by using the shortcut keys of Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. Once pasted, we have the ability to rearrange the dimensions by moving, rotating, and mirroring the dimensions however required. In this example, we first need to click on the yellow mirror button and then move the dimensions into the correct position. You can also measure negative dimensions if required. So here, in this large apartment drawing, we've already measured this whole area, but we need to deduct the lift shafts. It's very easy in CostX. Just go up to the CostX ribbon and click on the negative button. This will then turn on the negative measurement tool. In line mode, we just measure the elevator shafts. Now, when we look at the dimension group, we can see the area quantity has decreased as the negative measurement has been deducted. If we go to the Dimensions tab, we can see that particular negative measurement here. If we want to see both the negative and the positive areas that we have measured on the drawing, we can just click on the Both button up here once more. Measuring lengths is very similar to measuring areas in that we have two specific modes, line mode and point mode, that can be used to measure with. So back with our DWG, say we wanted to measure the length in this hallway. We can just select the dimension group and then again highlight the entire length using the polyline tool and measure the length with one click. Lengths of individual lines can also be measured from the drawing using the sticky cursor like so. Additional segments could then be added to the length dimension by holding the Control key down and clicking on the required additional lines in turn. Then, as we looked at before, we can turn on the negative measurement tool and take out our doorways like so. If we just go to the dimension group where we measured those lengths and hover over it, we don't only see the length, but we can also see other measurements like the wall area. These secondary quantities will be of great significance when we get to the workbook in part 2 of the CostX training video series. Now the wall area measurement is coming from the height that we have given this dimension group. So here the height we have given is 2.7 meters, which was indicated when we set up the dimension group. If we click into the dimensions pane, we can see both the positive and negative dimensions that have been added, the negative representing the doors. These also have a default height of 2.7 meters applied. Now normally, we're not going to have a door that's the full height of the partition. It's going to be a bit shorter. With CostX, we can change the height to say 2 meters. If we had multiple negative dimensions and we wanted to change the heights of them all, we can select a group of them and do that too. In order to check the wall areas, we can use this great function in CostX called View in 3D. On the ribbon, just click on the button and it will show us all selected dimensions on that particular drawing in 3D. This can be done in image and PDF files too. It's a great tool to visualize our takeoff. There's also even more we can do with our measurements in CostX. To start off with, let's create a new dimension group. Add a name of Window Type 1, a folder name of Windows and Exterior Doors. Measurement type set to length. A default display set to count. Default multiplier we will leave set to 1. Moving on to the height of the window, we can apply a default height of 1.8 meters and a default offset of 0.4 meters. Then, in the extended properties section, let's add lintels and then apply a unit of measurement of length for the newly added property. Once we have completed all the properties for the new dimension group, we can click on the Measured Dimensions tab at the top. In this window, we have the ability to further define the formula for the relevant properties. In this instance, we need to apply a formula for the lintels by clicking on the ellipsis button adjacent to this field, which will open up the Expression Editor window. In the Expression Editor window, we can double-click on the length dimension field and then add 150 mm to allow a 75 mm overhang either end. Click the Close button and notice the formula that we have just applied has been carried into the lintels field. Now we have completed all the dimension group properties. We can therefore proceed to click Insert and measure the 4 windows here. Notice that now, when we hover the mouse cursor over the measured window, it doesn't just show the count, length and wall area of the window, but it also gives us the lintel length. If we hover the mouse cursor over the dimension group itself, we notice all the secondary quantities in the yellow hint box. CostX allows you to measure counts where required. So say we wanted to measure those sanitary fixtures. Firstly, select the dimension group. Now, if we go to count this vanity basin and hold down the Shift key, we can see that the whole vanity unit is highlighted. This means the object is drawn as a block. We could click now to count that single block. However, if we additionally hold down the Control key, we can see that multiple vanity basins are highlighting on the DWG. This means that they are all drawn with the same block object. So with a single click of the button, all of the 3 highlighted vanity basins can be measured. This is an especially handy tool when you have a more complex drawing like the apartment building we looked at earlier. One of the other great features about CostX that can be especially handy for counting, as well as measuring areas and lengths, is the ability to turn off what we've measured. So we can just click this measured button, and those objects that we have counted are now gone from the drawing. This is great to ensure that we don't measure anything twice. Now, if you want to count objects in an image file, it's important to note that the blocks aren't included in image files. So you'd need to measure them in point mode and simply measure the doors one by one just by clicking on each one like so. CostX also allows us to overlay 2 drawings on top of one another and compare them using the Compare Drawings button. Firstly, with one drawing open, press the Compare Drawings button and select Compare Drawing to another drawing. Then select the drawing to compare with from the drop-down menu. The 2 drawings are then overlain. The colors of these 2 layers can be adjusted in CostX options if required. We can zoom in and out to examine the changes more closely, and by holding down the mouse click, we can reposition the top image to exactly align the 2 images. We can also adjust the color intensities. This allows us to see where changes have occurred. For example, for this particular drawing, the changes here occur mainly in the garage and storage area. We can also print the screen if we require, by selecting the option Print Drawing Window to Report, like so. This is an excellent way to keep a visual record of the changes for reference. To update quantities from here, we can either measure the quantity adjustments manually, or we can use the revisioning feature to update the quantities automatically. To learn more about revisioning, please refer to Part 4 of the CostX training video series. When we measure dimensions, we have the option to add a label every time we measure an area, length, or count. We have the ability to turn these on and off if required by clicking on the label button in the ribbon. Alternately, if we wanted to change them from numbers to something more relevant, we can view and change them in the Dimensions tab. So if we open that up, we can just click on this one, for example, and change it to bedroom 1. And then we can see it's changed here on the drawing as well. Within CostX options, we have the ability to change the labels to either display the dimension name, or simultaneously display the dimension name, quantity and unit, or just simply display the quantity and unit. We also have some additional features within the CostX dimension view that can help organize and review our takeoff. Firstly, we can also adjust the decimal places displayed for the dimension groups by clicking on the down arrow over here and change the decimal places as required. Furthermore, we can switch on a color indicator adjacent to the dimension group to allow us to see what dimension group is relevant to what section of the drawing. We also have the option to display multiple dimension groups simultaneously. We can even choose one of the selected dimension groups and continue measuring into it while displaying the others at the same time. We also have the option to show a legend. Simply by clicking here, we can turn the legend on and it will show the details of the selected dimension groups, including the quantity if required. Another great feature is the ability to add markups or notes to the drawing. Say we wanted to make a note on the takeoff that this area requires special tiles. Ensure the markup button is turned on and then just right-click on the drawing, select Create Markup, and then type in our special instruction about the tiles. Now that note is there for anyone else who might require it. So this concludes our video on part 1 of the CostX training video series focusing on 2D measurement.